Evening, Canby. Welcome to the Canby City Council regular meeting for April 21st of 2021. Thank you for joining us. I apologize for the delay in starting this evening. We had an urban renewal agency meeting before this and some very worthwhile and heavy conversation. So we needed to give the due diligence to that. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll get going. Just an agenda change. So the work session that we were planning for at 6:30 will be moved to the end of the meeting because we ran out of time. So if you're interested in that piece. The second agenda item is citizen input and community announcements, which is the opportunity for citizens to address the council on non-agenda items or to make announcements. And we do not have any right now for the evening. So we'll move on to the next piece, which is the approval of the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda that includes the minutes of the March 17th, 2021 City Council work session and regular meeting, the OLCC application for an off-premises license for Denny's Restaurant located at 1369 Southeast First Avenue, and the OLCC application for distillery sales for Columbia Distributing located at 2525 Southeast First Avenue.
And I will second.
The motion's been made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Varwig to approve the consent agenda, which includes approval of the minutes of the March 17th, 2021 City Council work session and City Council regular meeting, as well as OLCC application for an off-premise license for Denny's Restaurant located at 1369 Southeast First Avenue, and OLCC application for distillery sales from Columbia Distributing located at 2525 Southeast First Avenue. Any discussion or comment? All those in favor? I'm seeing that go 6 and no dissenting opinion. All right. Great. We'll move into ordinances and resolutions. The first one this evening is ordinance number 1546, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to execute change order number 4 to the 2020 wastewater treatment plant primary clarifier improvements contract with R.L. Reimers Company for completion of site restoration tasks and declaring an emergency. Scott, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Hudson and council members. Yes, this is second reading. We discussed this at the last meeting. It's also the declaring emergency so that we can immediately enact the contract. We don't have any new information for you. So unless you have any questions, I will just ask for your approval.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt ordinance 1546, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to execute change order number 4 to the 2020 wastewater treatment plant primary clarifier improvements contract with R.L. Reimers Company for completion of site restoration tasks and declaring an emergency.
I'll second and note that Councilor Bangs had his hand up.
Great. Thank you. So there's been a motion and a second. Councilor Bangs, comment, question?
No, I was going to make the same motion, but Sean jumped the gun on me.
Okay, perfect. Are there any questions or discussion regarding this? Okay. So the motion's been made by Councilor Varwig and seconded by Councilor Hensley to approve ordinance number 1546, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to execute change order number 4 to the 2020 wastewater treatment plant primary clarification improvements contract with R.L. Reimers Company for completion of on-site restoration tasks and declaring an emergency. All those in favor?
Second reading.
Sorry, thank you. I even circled it on my agenda. Roll call vote.
Councilor Baines.
Aye.
Council President Hensley.
Aye.
Councilor Tibbles.
Aye.
Councilor Parker.
Aye.
Councilor Spoon.
Aye.
Councilor Varwig.
Aye.
That carries 6-0. Thank you, everyone. Second, sorry, just checking the chat box. Second ordinance this evening is ordinance number 1548, an ordinance authorizing the Canby City Administrator to enter into a contract with Greenplay LLC to prepare a Parks and Recreation Master Plan and Parks System Development Charge Methodology update. Scott.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. This also is a second reading. No new information since the last meeting. And so with that, we would recommend approval. I do know that we are excited to move forward on our Parks and Rec Master Plan, as are the Parks and Rec Advisory Board members. So we look forward to that.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt ordinance number 1548, an ordinance authorizing the City of Canby Administrator to enter into a contract with Greenplay LLC to prepare a Parks and Recreation Master Plan and Park System Development Charge Methodology update.
And I will second.
All right. Motion has been made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Varwig to approve ordinance number 1548, an ordinance authorizing the Canby City Administrator to enter into a contract with Greenplay LLC to prepare a Parks and Recreation Master Plan and Parks System Development Charge Methodology update. And this is a roll call vote as well. Councilor Spoon?
Yeah, I just had a quick question for Scott that we didn't chat about last time. Some people were asking me if I know that there will be community input process and all of that. When might we get notice of when community input might occur and how people can get involved?
I'm not able to tell you exactly. We do have a scope of work that spells all that out. And actually, I think the scope of work is in the packet, but I can send you an answer to that question. And we'll get up and running as soon as is possible. And there'll be some startup process, and then the community inputs portions will follow that. So in the next, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 months is my guess, but I'll have to look at that scope of work for you.
My understanding, I think, Councilor Spoon, from my conversation with the Parks Group yesterday, was that we're looking at probably 4 different kinds of community meetings and updates along the project path. Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Okay. Melissa, roll call vote.
Councilor Bangs,
Aye.
Council President Hensley,
Aye.
Councilor Parker,
Aye.
Councilor Spoon,
Aye.
Councilor Tibbles,
Aye.
Councilor Varwig.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. Next up is ordinance number 1547, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a contract with Eagle Elsner Incorporated in the amount of $1,055,260 for construction of the 2021 street maintenance program. And I will turn that over to Scott to download us on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is our approval of our annual street maintenance program. Just sort of briefly, the projects that we're looking at this year there are 3 street projects that we're looking at. We have Northwest 2nd between Grant and Hawley, and that will receive we will be putting down a 2-inch overlay, and we'll be doing 4 ADA ramp replacements. Next will be Southwest 13th Avenue. We'll be doing some more significant base repair and a 2-inch overlay, 22 ADA ramp upgrades. And this is the portion of that road between 99 and South Ivy. And then the third is actually one of the anticipated county roads that we anticipate transferring to the city. In fact, we'll be bringing that to you at your next council meeting. And that is South Redwood, that if it becomes a city street, we will be completely reconstructing and doing 4 inches of pavement, and again, 22 ADA ramp upgrades. And that's between Southwest 13th and Township. That, just a note on that last project, again, that's based on if we receive that as a county road transferred to the city, that funding that comes with that will pay for that part of that. So if there were any issues with that not happening, we would amend the contract and have the contractor obviously not do that. But I suspect that will be something we'll be doing. So that's a quick snapshot. If you have any specific questions, we'd be happy to answer those. We also have Mr. Nelzine here, our Public Works Director, to help answer any questions related to this.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott. Councilor Banks.
Yeah, just a real quick clarification, Scott. You said the 13th project would take place between 99E and Ivy.
Yes.
I'm not sure that 13th does that.
Berg Parkway turns into 13th.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Good enough for me. Thank you.
There we go.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council approve ordinance 1547, authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a contract with Eagle Elsner Incorporated in the amount of $1,055,260 for the 2021 Canby Street maintenance.
I'll second, to come up for second reading on May 5th.
Yes, sorry, to come up for second reading on May 5th.
And Councilor Spoon, I see you flash the second on that one for me. Okay.
Third second.
The motion has been made by Councilor Varwig and seconded by Councilor Spoon to approve number 1547, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a contract with Eagle Elsner Incorporated in the amount of $1,055,260 for the construction of the 2021 street maintenance program with a second reading on May 5th. Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Seeing 6. And anyone against? Not seeing any. 6-0 on that. Great. Item D tonight is ordinance number 1549, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a contract with Kin Technology Incorporated to continue to provide computer technical services for the city of Canby, not to exceed $132,000, and repealing ordinance number 1529.
Mr. Mayor, for this item and the next, I'm going to ask Julie Blums, Finance Director, to give you the staff report.
Evening, Mayor, Council.
Hi, Julie.
Again. So tonight, before you, we have an ordinance to renew our contract with Kintech for IT services. We've had a contract with them since 2006 for all of our IT services. We have one city staff person in our tech services department, and that's Valerie. She's actually here tonight. And Kintech does all of the server maintenance and all of the really technical stuff that we don't do here. So we're looking to renew their contract again. I have spoken with them because we're starting to get close to the dollar amount where we will have to go out for an RFP. So I have talked to Tim Kimball, who is the owner, and let him know that next year we will probably need to go out for an RFP to do our due diligence for services. So he is aware of that. We are very happy with their service. They do a wonderful job. I have no complaints with them at all. They really stepped up during the COVID experience and helped us get laptops out and all the things we needed to get people working from home. So they are a very good asset for us. So this is their annual renewal.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Councilor Spoon?
Thanks, Mayor Hudson. Julie, when was the last time we did go out for an RFP? I have some concerns that the price, I understand the importance of continuity of service. I believe they do a good job. I also believe I have a responsibility to make sure that we're making sound financial decisions. I'm concerned that the cost went up almost 17% this year over last year. When was the last time we did go out for estimates? Because you said we've been with them for, sounds like 15 years now, but when was the last time we got competing pricing?
I do not believe we've probably done an RFP since then. I cannot find evidence that we have. So I'm not sure if back in 2006 an RFP was done for services and that's how we ended up with them. Do you know?
No, I think it was the original contract that, because it's under the amount required for RFP, and so they slowly climbed up in their prices.
Okay.
But we actually still get other quotes from folks, and their prices are less. I mean, I know the last time around, we talked to some other folks about how much the hourly was.
Okay.
And this one came under the other folks. If that's anecdotal, sorry, I don't have this.
No, that's fine. So what Joe is saying is that when they first came on in 2006, the dollar amount was under the amount needed to do an actual RFP. So, and they have stayed under that dollar amount all along, which is why I had that conversation with him this year, because we are getting to that point, that magic number where we are going to need to do one. I will say we pretty much have 2 dedicated staff to us for this price, as well as additional assistance from their project managers and other staff if we need it for project work. But we get about the equivalent of 2 staff for us for this price.
So Julie, is the kicker for an RFP 150,000?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Councilor Banks?
Thank you. I agree that for 2 people for this price, that's pretty good. We would have to pay benefits and such if we did that on our own. But I'm still not clear why we have a $22,000 increase over the course of the year. It's about 5 times the inflation rate. Are we getting more service in this new contract?
We have been using them more than what their estimates have been for hours in the past. And so this is more reflective of our actual usage of them from what it has been in the past. We have spent a lot of time on police equipment this year. Is just the nature of the beast. They have a lot of technology and it's needed work. And so there has been a lot of time spent over there. So this is more reflective of the hours that they're actually working.
I'm going to add something. This is Scott Archer here over the wings. Just to be clear, it's an hourly rate contract that if we don't use the services, so we still direct when we use the services.
That's the not to exceed.
It's not to exceed amount based on an estimate, but we will only utilize, pay for the services that we utilize based on an hourly rate, just to be clear.
Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. I move to approve ordinance 1549, authorizing the mayor and city manager to execute a contract with Kintech Inc. to continue to provide computer technical services for the city not to exceed $132,000 and replacing ordinance 1529 to come up for a second reading on the 5th of May, 2021.
I will second with the notation that my hand's been raised. So point of discussion, I would like to see, regardless of next year's number, it go out for RFP. But I will second this motion.
Sorry, I did not have my participant box open, so I apologize for missing the raised hands. So it sounds like, so Councilor Hensley, it's you're making the request that no matter what, we go out for an RFP for next year?
Yes.
Okay. Councilor Varwig, question, comment?
Just comment, over the past 2 years when this contract has come before us, I've abstained from any vote because of a business partnership that I had with the owner of Kin Technology. And I just wanted to make everyone aware that over the last year, that business partnership is dissolved. And so I no longer have that business partnership. And so moving forward, I will be voting on this contract. Just wanted to make that aware.
That. Thank you. I was waiting to see where that went because but I appreciate you being forthright with that. So any other discussion or comments? Yes, Councilor Spoon?
I just want to, I'm with Councilor Hensley. I'm actually not sure if I want to vote for this because I feel like if it were a business or a personal arrangement, I couldn't imagine a 17% increase in cost without doing some sort of cost comparison. So I'm having a hard time getting there without an RFP. I believe they provide good service. I believe the value's there, but I never take issue with price comparing as a public agency because I feel like we have an obligation to. So I'm a little bit conflicted. I'm not sure I'm going to vote for it, though. I just want to say I believe they provide good service. It has nothing to do with level of service, more that I think it's a pretty significant cost increase from last year to this year, and I'm really struggling with it. So I don't know if anyone can get me there, but
I would agree. But through this pandemic stuff, they've worked extra hard and they've made a lot of potentially glitchy things smoother. And so I'm willing to vote for it this time, but I would like to see an RFP for the next contract.
So,
and also, as Scott had mentioned, remember it's a not to exceed contract. It's not a contract for 132,000. It will not exceed that. So it could be, so 17% isn't necessarily the case. It could be 12% or 10% if it doesn't go above that.
Julie, do we have a ballpark right now year to date on what we've paid out in terms of services to Kin Tech, just as a reference point? Do you know that off the top of your head?
The last 2 weeks has been about 110,000.
Yeah, I do know that for this year, on a monthly basis, we have maxed out their hours. So we just have this year. So we will end up paying them their not to exceed for the current year.
Is this contract including a price per hour increase?
It does have a small increase in there for price per hour, but it's more the number of hours that we're requiring their service.
Do you know what that price increase is, Julie? Last year, this year?
I don't have it in front of me. I apologize.
Okay. Councilor Tibbles?
Yeah, just a couple comments. I think that's a long time without an RFP. I think even if it's underneath the value, I would almost like to see like a procedural thing where even if it's underneath the dollar amount, that every 4, 3, 5, whatever that may look like under that dollar amount, once we hit the dollar amount, obviously we're obligated to every year. And me knowing nothing about the relatively new with the services provided, I'm going to go with obviously supporting staff's recommendations that they say they do good work and they've really stepped up in the pandemic. But just as a business principle, RFPs for that long of a relationship, I feel like we should have some sort of safety protocol in place where X amount of years, even if it's under, just so we can, tell the residents, hey, we spot checked it. I mean, and so that's what I would like to see moving forward. I would even be okay with a RFP this year, to be honest. I would support that because of how I didn't realize how long that period was. But that's where I stand.
Councilor Banks?
Thank you. First, I would like to express joy. I didn't realize that there was a participant panel where I could raise my hand. So that was the first time I've done that, and I'm excited about it. Secondly, I do believe it makes fiscal sense to do what councilors Hensley, Spoon, and Tibbles are all saying. I would still urge us to approve this and for this year as the last year. And I would like, if we could, to have a report at the second reading of what that hourly rate increase is. If we could get that for our next meeting, please.
Definitely do that.
I still want to say I think this is a pretty good deal for us personnel-wise for technical and professional services.
Yeah, I would agree with that on all fronts. Great dialogue. I appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number 1549, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a contract with Kin Technology Incorporated to continue to provide computer technical services for the city not to exceed $132,000 and repealing ordinance number 1529 to come up for second reading May 5th, 2021.
I appreciate that. We already had a motion on the table by Councilor Bangs, and you had seconded it. So,
And
but
I talked so long I forgot.
I appreciate the thoroughness. And okay, so yes, I have a motion by Councilor Bangs and seconded by Councilor Hensley to consider ordinance number 1549, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a contract with Kin Technology Incorporated to continue to provide computer technical services for the city not to exceed $132,000 and repealing ordinance number 1529 and to come up for a second reading on May 5th. Any other discussion or questions? Councilor
Yes. Now I was going to ask a question of it, and it looks like we're probably going to move forward with it. I don't know, but Julie, do you know when does our current contract expire? And if we don't approve this one tonight, do we have a gap in service?
Yes. Our current contract expires June 30th. If we don't approve this, we very much risk having a gap in service.
Okay. So I would agree with Councilor Bangs that we should move this forward and definitely go for the RFP next year. I know enough about the owner of Kintech to know that he's confident in his pricing, so I'm sure he would welcome an RFP if that's what we need to do. But I'll wait till the vote, but I think we should move forward with it.
Oops, sorry. Thank you. Councilor Spoon.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good deal. I appreciate the work they did in the pandemic. I'm leaning towards voting for it. In the future, if there's a potential risk of gap in service, is it possible to get, I mean, I don't like the idea of feeling pressured into voting for something to avoid a gap in service. So I would love to maybe have this conversation a month earlier in the future, if that's possible. And then also, just as an idea in the future for stuff like this, I would entertain in the future a conversation, resolution, or work session over making it policy that every so often we have RFPs on professional contracts, so that that's actually codified as part of our process. But yeah.
Is something that we are working on internally, that some of these long-term contracts that have been in place for years, that we are working on getting them onto a schedule for RFP. I just took over this department in September. So I'm still feeling the waters out. And this is something from the finance perspective that I have looked at for the last couple of years, that we were getting close and it's been a while. And now that I am over this department, that is something that I called Tim and was very upfront with him that we're going to have to do this. So.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. Great points all around. Any other questions? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion carries 6-0. Thank you all. Next ordinance is ordinance number 1550, an ordinance authorizing the city of Canby to enter into a contract with Grove, Mueller, and Swank PC for audit services for first reading. Julie.
All right. So as we just talked about, the RFP process, our contract with our current auditors, which happen to also be Grove, Mueller, and Swank, has expired. And so we did go out for an RFP. I sent it out to several firms that I know directly, and we advertised it as well on our city website. And we did get some interest from one firm in particular, came back with some questions, additional questions that we answered, provided that feedback, posted that on the website as well. And in the end, we only ended up getting one proposal. and that is from our current audit firm. The firm that asked the questions, I really thought they would submit a proposal, but I've since learned that they are short-staffed. They've been down a person for quite a while. And so I think they just don't have the capacity to take on another client right now. So we got one proposal. We've been very happy with Grove, Mueller, and Swank. I've worked with several different audit firms in my career, and this team does a good job. And they're very upfront. They give us recommendations if there are things that we need to look at changing. So I am very comfortable with continuing a new contract with them and maintaining that relationship.
Councilor Parker.
Well, the good news is you only have 2 more years to hear my annual speech on how I think municipal audits are a waste of time. That the fraud in West Lynn, the fraud in Malala, both of those came on the heels of a dozen years of clean audits. So it used to be, back when I was a manager at the State Audits Division, that we called the Municipal Audit Law the CPA Full Employment Law. But what it appears to be is, like our earlier in the year discussion about jobs, is that this also is an industry that seems to be suffering from trying to be able to recruit people to do these things. So I'll reluctantly go along. But again, I've never known of a municipal audit that has come up with a fraud. And in fact, I know of at least 2 cities that are adjacent to us that have had major financial fraud issues. And each year the auditor said, we have found nothing that is irregular.
I understand. I will say that by law, we're required to do this. So we don't really have a choice.
I understand that, and we need to follow the law, but it's a stupid law.
I like to hear Parker say that, but I will move to approve ordinance number 1550, an ordinance authorizing the city of Canby to enter into a contract with Grove, Mueller, and Swank PC for audit services to come up for second reading May 5th, 2021.
I'll second.
The motion's been made by Councilor Hensley, second by Councilor Varway, to approve ordinance number 1550, an ordinance authorizing the city of Canby to enter into a contract with Grove, Mueller, and Swank PC for audit services, with the second reading to come up on May 5th, 2021. Any other questions or discussions on accounting services and whether or not they're relevant? Councilor Bangs.
I don't have a relevancy question. I just curious about the RFP process. It appears to be like a 3-week period, and we only got 1 bid. Is that a normal length of time? Is this just a reflection that like auditors are too busy, or yes, did we have too short of an RFP time period?
You know, I reached out to the firms that I sent it to actually before we issued the RFP and let them know that we were going to be issuing it so that they had a heads up it was coming. I really was surprised we did not get more.
Julie, let me help you out. This used to be a competitive business where CPA firms would undercut each other on the first year of a new contract. So something's happening in the economy out there.
I will say my experience is that in other RFPs I have done for this service in other cities, Grove, Mueller, and Swank has always come in as the lowest bidder.
And Julie, prior to Grove, Mueller, and Swank, our previous audit company, we were with them for how long?
I don't. I think 3 or 4 years.
I think it was 4.
I knew, Councilor Parker's. it was a long time. And I think that you were the one that initiated saying, hey, we needed to, you were not.
Haley had done that before I got, yeah. And
yeah, because it was time.
yeah. And Mayor, to your point, that is the company that I thought was going to bid and did not.
Oh, okay. All right.
We are, however, I will say this, we are using them in a different capacity for our transit stiff audit. So.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, any other comments on that? All right, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, Councilor Parker, Councilor, no?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Anyone against?
Aye.
Thank you. Anyone abstaining? All right, that passes 5-1. Thank you all.
See you soon.
All right, Julie, thank you. Item F this evening under ordinances and resolution is resolution number 1346, a resolution authorizing an addendum to the existing city attorney employment contract, and Scott will be presenting that piece. Scott, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hudson. This proposed addendum to the city attorney's employment agreement is being recommended to you jointly by both Mr. Lindsay and I. We both see this as something that is advantageous to the city to provide administrative needs utilizing existing staff. As you all know, Joe is your direct employee. So he works directly for you, obviously. This proposed arrangement on the addendum to his contract does not change that circumstance. Rather, what it does is it amends his contract to include the title of Assistant City Administrator while retaining his primary role as City Attorney. So adding the Assistant City Administrator title to his contract allows Joe to help fulfill what is now a vacant role. We used to have a full-time Assistant City Administrator. We do not anymore. That position has been vacant for a while. We've divvied up some of those duties, but there is really not anybody acting in that capacity. So this arrangement would allow for flexibility within Mr. Lindsay's contract to actually administer and be able to be responsible for direction of staff under the city administrator's purview. And it provides also for the opportunity that he can serve as the acting city administrator as may be necessary. So for example, if I get to take a vacation and go out of town sometime, perhaps far away, the mayor says maybe not so much, then Mr. Lindsay could actually be the officially designated assistant city administrator. And would have the authority under the contract to do that. So I know that Joe might want to say a few words to you as well, because this is his employment agreement with you. But I just want you, council, to know that this is something that I wholeheartedly support and actually recommend. And I have to say that Joe, in my 6 months here, Joe has just been a tremendous asset and has been incredibly supportive and helpful in my transition into this role with the city of Canby. And in a lot of ways, Joe has already been acting as the de facto assistant city manager, city administrator, but hasn't been formally recognized as such and doesn't have the formal authority to do that in the current contract. So this really helps in that regard in a lot of ways. And I think it just solidifies something that has been envisioned, perhaps with some prior council conversations, and brings that all to fruition. So I'm recommending this. And Joe, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Thanks for the opportunity to even make this pitch. I got a taste of this being the interim. And, as part of my personal goals, am excited to kind of add a bit of that to the menu of some of the stuff that I can do for the city. I also like the idea as kind of a legal purist that it actually does add the ability for Scott to direct some of my work he couldn't before, so that it puts me under that umbrella of the administrator as to those sort of duties, which would allow me for supervision and such. And again, it does make kind of a de facto in the event of his absence, a de facto predecessor, so that we don't have to go through the oddity of coming back to you guys to ask who's actually going to be in charge. So it serves kind of a lot of functions. The thing it also does is intentionally our charter does say you can mix two or more of your city officials. So it is allowable by charter. The charter also envisions that I have there's a check and balance between your legal advice you get and the city administrator who carries out your stuff. In the event that one of us is being problematic, the other one gets to go without worry to you guys and complain about it. This keeps that intact because this is really just a piece of it, and the way it's written, it's a severable piece. So with it, I basically wrote in a clause that says and either people can end this with zero effect with 30 days written notice, and it won't mean anything. It won't mean a negative thing or a positive thing. So if you guys ever change your mind in the future too, you have the ability to, or frankly, if I decide that it isn't a direction I want to be, or say somebody comes around in the future and they're not hip to this, we can end this within 30 days easily with zero worries. But then everybody has a heads up about what's coming. So that's why it's even a 30-day deal. But it is something that I would be excited to do. It does meet some of my goals. And I know I sent you guys an email on this, referencing some of the material that in some of the history of our interactions. And so without divulging that, I'll let you guys do it. You hold the privilege on some of our conversations that come out of exec session. But if you do recall the discussions, and feel free to ask me, but I'm not going to divulge that privilege. It's a one-way privilege. So, but just so you know, this is something that we've been trying to work through, and had we gotten closer to or gotten to your goal setting session, Scott and I were trying to work together to figure out what makes sense for the city and takes advantage of who's here and who's committed and who not only wants to do the work, but will do it well. So hopefully this is a plan that you're behind so that we can continue this relationship.
Joe and Scott, thank you. I know when you first brought this up with me, my concern was the division of your role as our attorney and counsel, and then that now filling the assistant city manager position, at least on some role. So I'm not sure I totally relinquished that concern, but I'm willing to go through it with this and support this, because I think, as we've stated a couple of times regarding Scott when he first came on, was it's your team, your department heads, how you envision maybe creating a better, more efficient model. That's your purview, and we encourage that piece. And then when we did your evaluation, that was a goal that you had set out, was trying to figure out how to get more exposure to being a city administrator and getting supervisory pieces. And the only really way to do that is through probably moving into a capacity like this. So I appreciate the creativity, and I think we get some additional support in that regards. So that's my comments. Councillor Spoon and then Councillor Bangs. Councillor Spoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joe, I have a couple of questions, but I want to preface it by saying, please know this has absolutely nothing to do with my confidence in you or my belief that in theory it's even a good idea. I have a couple of more technical questions about how this would work and whether or not that's doable for me. But I don't want you to take anything I say as a question of my confidence in your skills or ability to do the job. So I'm going to preface it with that. Okay. One of the things we have talked about over the course of the last several years is our efforts, and we've seen it in our budgeting and bringing someone on to do some of the to help with prosecution. And what I feel like what we've been working towards as a council is in taking tasks off your plate so that you can serve in your best role as city attorney. And so I'm a little bit confused, I guess, that now I feel like we're expanding your responsibilities outside of the scope of city attorney, when I feel like what we've been working towards is giving you more room to spend time gaining knowledge and experience as a city attorney, so that to handle a broader scope of the work we do. So I guess I'm a little bit confused about that. And then my other question, I'll just give you both questions, and then you can kind of talk about them how you wish, is that my other concern is I'm reading through the documents in the packet, and you'll still report to us as city attorney, but you would report to Scott as assistant city attorney. And I have some confusion about how that would function in terms of us evaluating you annually in your performance and then determining compensation if you don't wholly report to us, and how we get the whole big picture on that. If those questions make sense.
Okay, so the situation here is that first and foremost, I am your city attorney. This was something that we came up with as a way of kind of using what's already in the charter and yet maintaining the integrity of that position, at the same time allowing for, like we say, a little bit of growth in those areas. I'm a busy guy, and I'd like to think I will give my all in any regard, no matter what you call me. But this, from a standpoint of allowing me we're moving around some of the duties and already did when I was interim, and I've kept a lot of those duties anyway. So in a sense, this kind of solidifies that, and also allows for other chess pieces, I guess, to be put on there. It's kind of interesting. I take my job for you first and foremost super seriously. It's also a job for you and for Canby anyway. And I will do whatever other duties as assigned, and I'll also help out with all of the department directors anyway. But yeah, this is a way to kind of solidify that in a way that I think was a cool option that we came up with. But the other question about, what was your second question? I'm trying to think.
It had more to do with, if you only report to us for, the vast majority of your job, but not all of it, how, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, I guess, we would handle evaluation on compensation if you don't really report to us for the totality of the work that you're doing now, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, and that was a way of trying to keep the integrity of Scott's position intact, which is he is the head of staff. And so if I'm doing anything staff related and directing staff, really it needs to go through him. And so if I'm taking on positions where I'm directing any sort of staff, then really what it does is it gives him an opportunity to tell me, don't do that. You know what I mean? Or that I don't think you handled that well. I would like the staff to be handled this way. So that's kind of the direct supervision of anything that has staff directives involved. Otherwise, I would be entirely independent of him and only akin to you guys. That still is the lion's share of my responsibilities are to you guys, and I answer to you, and it takes, a plurality of votes from you guys to vote me off the island. And so therefore the integrity is there for me to always represent you and your legal interests outside of him directing me. The reason he would direct me is in terms of if I get involved with staff, just from a purist standpoint, he's the one in charge of staff. So I had to give homage to the idea that if I'm going to be directing anybody, I have to report to him or get his permission to do it.
No, appreciate all of that. I think my question was more related to how you foresee us evaluating you if you not all of your tasks, if you don't really report to us for all your tasks. So do you foresee like Scott being party to your annual evaluation? Like, you know, if a portion of your duties are reporting to Scott and he can say, no, please don't do that. You know, so you have this whole portion of your job interacting with him and staff that is not city attorney work. Like, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how we evaluate then, because you would be compensated for this portion of the work, but you wouldn't be reporting to us for this portion of the work. And then how do we evaluate your performance if you're not really reporting to us? Does that make sense?
I do, but I would say first and foremost, you guys evaluate me. I'm your direct employee. This was a way for you to use what's in the charter to expand that pie just a little bit. And the reality is it's a nominal amount, frankly. So, I mean, I have to come to you guys to alter the contract anyway. And that's why we're here today, even, frankly. So you guys have final say on the evaluation of my work, no matter what. The reality is, I'm going to be coming to you guys, and you guys could shave this off at any time anyway. So if it's not something that ends up working out, we think that the reason we're coming and double recommending it is because we think it will work out in the city's best interest and will also happen to serve my personal goals that we were talking about earlier.
You're muted,
Anything else?
Mr.
Anything else, Councilor Spoon? No? Okay. Councilor Bangs and then Councilor Hensley.
Thank you. Two things. Number one, do we have any intention to ever fill that assistant city manager position again? Or is this in lieu of that?
Well, Scott is the person who comes to you and at budget time and asks about that position. There isn't any, this is not for the foreseeable budget. But we are a growing city. So I think you can always assume that eventually various positions will kind of mature and grow as cities grow.
Councilor Banks, that's a great question. And so I will always be evaluating that, you know, the needs of the city, the staffing needs, and how the puzzle pieces get put together. And so, you know, again, the contract amendment is written in such a way that you can end that, or I believe I can end that if I see that we need, you know, a full-time assistant city administrator at some point. But this is something that I think in the meantime, and, you know, not necessarily with an endpoint, but just allowing, I think, for what we already have in place to be utilized, and I'll continue to evaluate that. So I think it's just going to continue to be a work in progress or a work in process. And if ever needs change, we'll come back and talk about that.
Well, I believe that for $7,200, this is a whole lot cheaper than hiring a new person and paying for health insurance, et cetera. Therefore, I move to approve Resolution 1346, authorizing an addendum to the existing city attorney employee contract.
I'll second that. And with my hand raised, just note that to Councilor Spoon's point, I think honestly, just getting a report from the city administrator on his behavior, on his performance in that role would suffice in our evaluation. So with that, I'll second the motion.
Hate when I do that. Motion's been made by Councilor Bangs and seconded by Councilor Hensley to approve Resolution 1346, a resolution authorizing an addendum to the existing city attorney employment contract. Any other questions or discussion?
I think we overthought it enough.
So, seeing no other questions or conversation, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? That passes 6-0. Scott and Joe, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Joe,
Yes.
careful what you wish for.
No kidding. Thank you.
Next on our agenda this evening is following up on discussion regarding the street CIP and Ivy Street undergrounding pieces. And Mr. Archer will recap that and fill us in some more.
Thank you, Mayor Hodson. And may I just say before I give you this report, I want to express my appreciation for your support of that last action. So this is a follow-up discussion for you to look at some information that we have. It's really kind of bringing together two conversations that have been happening because they're interrelated, and that is some varying conversations at council meetings and work sessions on both the street capital improvement plan, the 5-year CIP, and we've had some discussion about that. And you asked that we bring you back some follow-up information with more detail than we had provided. And so we've got that. And that ties in then with our recent discussion or discussions about the Ivy Street project and the potential to pay for the undergrounding of the utilities. And because the Ivy Street project obviously has the potential impact, or it is, to become part of our street CIP, we thought this was a perfect opportunity to bring both those items together to you and present some information. So I'm going to ask Julie to come back up again and provide some kind of a walkthrough of what we've put together. And I think there's going to be some questions and discussion here. I also want to acknowledge that, again, we've got Jerry Nelzine, our Public Works Director, here to help with this conversation if needed. But what we're looking for is perhaps direction on the Ivy Street undergrounding. You asked us to bring back more specific recommendations on how we might fund that, and we're going to present that. And so based on that, if you're so inclined, we would appreciate any direction you might have tonight, or if needed, we'll continue to have that discussion and further refine with you as you might ask us to do. So I will allow Julie to give you that presentation, and then we'll be happy to do some Q&A with you.
Good evening again. Okay, so as Scott said, this is something that we've talked about several times and in different venues. And the last time we discussed this was at the February 17th work session, and a request was made to see our 5-year funding forecast before you guys would be able to make a decision on whether or not we could go forward with the undergrounding of the power on Ivy Street. So I put together a spreadsheet here with our 5-year projected funding, our revenues and funding sources. It's a lot of information. So the long and short of it is that we have it worked out to pay for all of the projects in our CIP over the next 5 years with the funding sources that are available to us. So I'm confident, barring, I don't know, a pandemic, that we will have the money coming in over the next 5 years that will pay for these projects. So the big question is, do we have enough money to pay for the undergrounding? And I think that by the time we get to that point of needing the funds, that I actually think that we will probably have it in our fund balance. But we have a couple of options to pay for it, but we can pay for it. So the first option, we could do an interfund loan from our sewer fund. Those are interfund loans are easy, they're inexpensive. They are repaid at the same rate that the LGIP pays our interest. So there's really no loss to the fund that's loaning the money. For capital projects, you can do a loan for up to a 10-year period. Another option is taking it out of our street fund balance. That would bring our fund balance down quite a bit, but we would still have enough in reserve to be comfortable. And the third option is using money from the American Recovery Plan or Rescue Plan. We are still waiting for guidance on what we can use that money for. We've been told explicitly it can be used for sewer and broadband and water. They did not call out transportation projects. So we're waiting for further guidance on that. But the hope is that we will be able to use it for transportation projects. And if we are allowed, that would be my first recommendation, is to use that money for this project. If not, then we can use fund balance or we can do an interfund loan. Either option will work, but we will have those options when we get to the point that we'll need the money to do this, the undergrounding.
And Julie, if I may, Mayor and Council, I want to make it explicitly clear that you'll see in that 5-year CIP worksheet, because I know this is of high interest to all of you, the 99E to Industrial Park or AKA Walnut Street Extension Project is fully funded in the 5-year CIP. And so the use of the fund balance that Julie is referring to is in addition to that being funded. So I just wanted to point that out, that it is funded in that CIP.
Thank you.
So that doesn't draw away from the Walnut Street nor any other planned road improvement projects.
The nice thing with the industrial park connection is that project is eligible for improvement SDCs because it's all new and it's all for growth. So whereas the undergrounding is not eligible for that funding source, so they're not competing with each other for the same funding sources. And we do have a decent balance in our improvement SDCs, and which will pay for the majority of the extension project to 99E. Questions? Councillor Parker, you funded the spreadsheet, so I want to hear from you.
Well, I'll say thank you. This is excellent, and also, as a former journalist, you started with the lead that we can do this, and so I'd say let's do this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie, thank you for the spreadsheet. That is a lot of information, and it's a good capture of what we're looking at from just even like the street maintenance program alone, the cost. And we just approved $1 million tonight to do that. And we look at 20, 23, 24, that's there's going to be a lot of money spent on paving and projects for sure. Roads are not cheap. So I appreciate you putting this together. Councillor Bangs, I saw you wave your hand there.
Right. I just wanted to indicate support for option 2 to use street funds to bury these lines because it is, I believe, relevant. Actually, option 3 is my last choice, not only because we don't even know if we can legally do that. So I would prefer us, I'm not clear why in option 1, we would borrow money from ourselves and then have to pay interest back. That seems, I don't understand how that works. But Perhaps Jerry can explain it, but it's still, I believe that we should do it out of the street fund. As long as we still got that Walnut and those other improvements funded, this is a street improvement that we're looking at, and I think that's relevant.
Yeah, Julie, what's the, and sorry, I didn't write the number down from a couple weeks ago, but what is the dollar figure in the ARP monies? What is?
Our total is about 3.6 million.
Okay. Thank you.
I have already worked on allocating some of that towards lost revenue that we have. We do actually have some lost revenue in some areas, which will come forward during the budget process. I'll explain that more when we get there, but we do still have a very significant amount of that 3.6 million available.
Thank you, Julie. Councillor Spoon and then Councillor Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Julie, just for clarity, in the staff report, when you say street fund, you mean street maintenance program that people pay the fee for, right?
No.
Okay. I was getting confused because I'm looking at the spreadsheet and I see street fund. That's what I thought. I didn't think you were talking about that, but I wanted to make sure. I'm a fan of doing this project. I wish that Canby Utility Board would be a little bit of a better partner in sharing some of the financial burden of it. Is there any hope? I know we ask this every time, but is there any hope that there's still room to negotiate there?
I'm going to let Scott take that one.
Councilor Spoon, I will just tell you that, so if you give us the green light to go forth and do this, that process, and again, we have a good amount of time before the project happens, but we do need a definitive answer somewhat soon, as we discussed last meeting. We will then begin a process of negotiating an agreement with Canby Utility, because they've committed, at least at this point, $300,000. But that certainly opens the opportunity to have further discussion. So Mr. Murphy and I talk fairly regularly, and we've met about this several times. And I would just tell you that without any promises or commitment, but I would just continue to effort to find the best arrangement possible for us on that situation. But right now, I would just say they've committed to $300,000, and that's all I can promise you at the moment. But okay. I'll continue working.
I appreciate that. I mean, what I'm hearing, if I'm understanding correctly, is that you want a yes or no on doing it. We don't have to. And what you showed us is that we have 3 potential options for paying for it. We don't have to decide how we're paying for it tonight. We can wait and see what those fund balances are later and make a decision. Can we do a combination of things? Like, do we have options? Okay. So in that case, I think that I have enough information to confidently say, let's move forward with it, with a caveat that we continue to negotiate with Canby Utility Board in hopes that they find it in their hearts to be a better partner with the city and covering the cost of doing this. But I feel confident that the money's there for it to be done. And then at a later date, we can make a decision on how and what way those funds are accumulated or determined.
Thank you, Councillor Spoon. So, Julie, the total price tag that we're looking at from county estimates is 1.3 million, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so really our nut to cover is $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I had a follow-up piece to that and it totally slipped my mind. So I'm going to let Jordan talk and maybe Council President Hensley. I got it. It's the easy tiger. You're welcome.
I was like, thank you.
I'll let those two speak and see if I can remember what it was. Council President Hensley.
Oh, okay. You noodle what your thought was. And I'll circle back to what I said at the last meeting. I'm not a fan and I will never vote for interfund balance loans. We already shot that idea down with the library project resoundingly, and I don't think it's a good idea still. And I don't like, let's figure out how to pay for it later. Like I said last meeting, that's like, let's, read the bill after we pass the bill. I'm not sold on this project. And for us to sign on to $1 million, I'm not sure that I'm confident that we want to do that. And in looking at the scope of the work, I'm not really clear. It doesn't look like it goes to 13th or to the river. It looks like it only covers part of Ivy. Am I correct in that?
Yes, actually, that was another piece of this I hadn't touched on. The undergrounding goes from 99E to approximately where Canby Sign and Graphics is. At that point, the lines cross over the street, so they would still be above ground from that point on, but up to Canby Sign and Graphics, they would be underground.
So $1 million for not very much linear feet. I'm not a fan of this idea.
Councilor Tibbles?
Yeah, a couple things. One is I would echo the sentiments of Council President Hensley that I think that saying we're going to do it without deciding how we're going to pay for it is just an irresponsible way to govern, and I am not a fan of doing that whatsoever. So with that, I think that the space and how much coverage is problematic as well. And I wonder, is there a way to leverage, saying would be moving forward if we get X amount of more help from Canby Utility Board, not just hey, I guess I'll go back to them, but we're going to go back regard. Like, to me, that's like, there's no power in that negotiation whatsoever. It's just like, well, I'll try to get a better rate. But if we go with an understanding of like, if Canby Utility Board covered 600,000 or whatever that number might be, then do we have a deal where there's a tangible, like, we would move forward, but this is where we have to be, versus we're going to move forward either way, but it'd be great if you pitched in a little bit more, like, what's the incentive? There's no incentive. We have zero leverage in that negotiation.
Okay, let me jump in real quick. If I may respond, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Councilor Tibbles, I just want to tell you, I agree with your first comment about going forward without direction on the funding. So that's actually what we're asking for tonight, or we're presenting it and giving you the information so you consider that if you wanted to direct us tonight or later, is we're presenting options and actually suggesting that you would direct us with, give us your either this is the one way we want to pay for it, or this is the priority. For example, you could say, I'm just hypothesizing, but you could say, we direct you to go forward and pay for that with the street fund balance that we've presented, unless the other federal funding sources may become available for that. But we agree with you, and that's actually what we're looking for tonight, is saying this is how we want to pay for it, not just whether or not we want to do it. And then the second part of that is, I would just simply say, that's up to the council. Staff is just being responsive to council requests to consider this idea and to bring back options. And we would take your marching orders, whatever the majority of the council might ask us to do. So if that would be the will of the council, we'd certainly proceed that way. Again, I can just tell you where we're at right now with that, and so there's, yeah.
So based on that explanation, Julie and Scott, so what I'm hearing is that potentially, sorry, not potentially, but the street funds balance would be there in 23, 24 to do this project. And that there's a good chance, until we know for sure what the American Recovery Plan would allow this to be covered, but even with the number crunching we've done on terms of lost revenue, reimbursement to the city, for example, just the costs of pandemic, there may be money, if it's allowed to be used, that we could then filter towards this project. If not, then that's really not off the table. But option 2 is there if we want to do that. Okay.
Right.
Councilor Varwig, and then Council President Hensley again.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, even if you can't finish the meal, you still eat dinner. I understand it doesn't go all the way to 13th, but I still think that it is important to do this project. We can't go back and do it if we don't underground it now. So we have to move forward with it, I believe. I don't love interfund loans either. So option 1 for me is off the table. Number 3 is an unknown. So I think that leaves only option number 2. And I think that's the way to proceed, is using option number 2, with the caveat that if number 3 gives us the money to be able to do it, that's how we would pay for it. So, but I definitely think we need to move forward with it because we can't go back and do it later.
Thank you, Councilor Varwick. Council President Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to reiterate I'm not a fan of the project. I don't think it is worth the money given the scope of work. And in this conversation tonight, as in the last one, I've heard a lot of, if allowed, maybe, if by the time we need the money, I think it'll be there. I'm just not confident, and I'm going to be a no on this.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Banks.
So I remain in favor of item number 2, option number 2, and I'm a yes on this. I would like to re-explore burying those lines under the whole stretch of Ivy out to 13th. I understand they crossed the road. I am 100% confident that in my neighborhood, the electricity travels underneath the roads. My neighbors have electricity across the street, and I have it as well. And there's no wires overhead. So I'd like to understand a little better why this thing doesn't go all the way out for that whole project. I'm not uncomfortable with ripping apart the street. It's been perpetually ripped apart for most of the last 6 months. So that doesn't seem to hold us back. So I strongly urge us to look at number 2.
Can I address your question?
Yes, please.
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
So part of the issue is it's not about tearing up the street farther. It's the fact that the lines go across people's property. And it's buying that right of way, having to dig through people's backyards to bury lines. That's the issue.
Where are the lines going to get buried in the stretch from the sign people down to 99?
They're going to be buried along the stretch of the road because they parallel the road. It Canby Sign and Graphics is where they
also get buried to wherever the other hubs are. So they actually go both parallel and vertical.
Yes.
Yeah, or perpendicular.
Yes. At Canby Sign and Graphics is where they stop running more parallel and they start going across neighborhood yards. There's a picture in your packet that kind of shows, well,
I can speak to that a little bit because I live right there, Councilor Banks. There are homes, neighboring homes to our property, where the power lines actually go to the house, right. And so the power line actually goes from Ivy across the property and attaches to, I forget what they call it, like a masthead or something on the house, which is not every property, but that is the case with a couple of properties. And I suspect that that's kind of what you're talking about, that it would be more difficult than it's not as easy to underground that when the power line physically goes to someone's house, right? Whereas up until that point, the power lines don't do that, I guess is the easiest way to explain that. Did I catch what you were talking about?
Have Jerry come up and give you,
Okay.
I'm not a utility person, so.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can see it from my house. So I see what you're talking about.
Precisely why we have Mr. Nelzine here tonight. So,
Yeah, hi everyone. How are you?
Good, Jerry. How are you?
Good, doing good. Yeah, the undergrounding, I have experience with this on the First Avenue development, and the stuff out in the street, it's just money and easy digging, cost, trenching pipe, conduit, and pulling wire. It's the connections to the house, like Councilor Spoon was saying. You know, we're doing estimates of $45,000 just for the electrician portion to connect to each house and getting permission to go through yards and stuff like and such. people that wouldn't give us permission, most likely we would have to leave a pole up along the property, connect to that underground and come up. The other thing is the portion from basically what Julie was saying at Canby Signs and Graphics, the project limits basically stop at 11th.
County's project, right?
On the county paving or the reconstruction project. So we're planning on paving because we got sidewalks and everything up to 13th. We're planning on paving all of that. But as far as continuing undergrounding all the way to 13th would clean everything up. It just would add so much cost to the project. That's something also that, I mean, it could be done down the road because the project limits stop at 11th there anyway. So down the road, I know we hate putting stuff off, but at this point, the big decision that Scott and I have been working with Clackamas County on is that portion to 11th. And we're in a holding pattern on getting right away for this project because it changes for the undergrounding. And I know the project's been put out and everyone's asking why do we have to have an answer right now? It's because the process takes so long. So to keep this project moving forward, I appreciate Mr. Archer getting this to this point right now for the decision, whether we're going to underground it or move the power poles, because it does dictate what the county's right-of-way team does for getting us property to do this. So as far as getting power all the way to 13th would be an ideal situation. It would, but that would be another conversation at this point.
Another million, it sounds like. Hey, thank you very much, Jerry. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, okay.
Councilor Tibbles?
Yeah, so reading kind of where everyone's standing on this, I think for the benefit of the Canby taxpayer, and I also am talking about and sharing the same concerns that Councilor Hensley had. There's a lot of things I'm not a fan of on this, and a lot of it revolves around the unknown or the thing we think it's going to be this. And so I think that it would be prudent of us to request that extra pitch in of the utility board to cover what that gray area of the unknown is past the 300. And we include that in the orders in order to move forward, we would need that. So I am curious to hear other councilors' points of view on that, because when I hear somewhat, I would be a no vote without that, because we're talking about, well, we think there's the funds here and we're pretty sure, and we don't know if we're going to be able to use option 3. And it's like, okay, then hedge against and get the more, and we all want Canby Utility to be a better partner. So then make that part of the agreement to move forward. So that's where I stand.
Okay, thank you. I think, again, I'm looking at this saying that, that if we look at item number 2, that, there will be sufficient fund balance reserves at that time for the undergrounding piece. I think that, the conversation with Canby Utility should be ongoing regarding this project. We did see it balloon exponentially, as Jerry said, with trying to make the connections from to the houses and even just to the businesses alone. That cranked up the price. So I think the ongoing conversation with Canby Utility should absolutely be part of the conversation. Sorry, Councilor Banks.
Thank you. I understand where Councilor Tibbles and Hensley are coming from. However, I don't believe the city can really afford to have us postpone this decision. So it sounds like they need direction now on it. Yeah, I think the Canby Utility Board should look into paying more. I just don't want to know how much they had to pay hanging all those wires up again. I still want that information. But in the meantime, in order for us to make progress on this, I think we need to decide quicker than that. I don't believe there are as many unknowns. If we don't choose item 3, and if we don't choose item 1, we're not borrowing from ourselves. So I again, urge us to support the second one. I don't know if we need to vote. There's no resolution involved with this, right? Would it make it easier if we voted on this?
Mr. Archer, do you want to make a comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to say that, yes, I think it would be helpful if there is a direction from the council that you would just make a motion and ask us to proceed in that direction. I do want to say again, there will be follow-up actions such as agreements that we'd be bringing back to you that will even further formalize that. But it would greatly help us if council was inclined, if there was a majority direction, that you would give us that in the form of a motion so we could proceed, at least letting the county know thumbs up or thumbs down at this point. That's really the question now. But you, if you included in that direction to us your recommended funding, we would also appreciate that if you're so inclined.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Councilor Tibbles, you had another comment?
Yeah, can we include can we decide and discuss as a council what we want that dollar amount that utility comes back with? Because we're going to put it as a motion, we want to move forward, but can it include the payment of 600,000 contribution versus 300,000? And will that put a halt to the project? Because you're still going to come back with that wouldn't slow anything down, but it's one conversation to the next meeting, if I'm correct. Is that right, Scott?
I think I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you were asking there. I know what you're saying about the request to CUB about the additional funding, but the direction for us to say yes or no to the county, is that what you're referring to, Councilor? I think we would need to know definitively if you, the council, at least a majority of you are saying, yes, we want to do this, and we can work on that component of it, then the answer would be yes. But if you're saying it's contingent on that, if that were the motion, then I wouldn't want to tell the county that until that conversation were to happen and follow up with Canby Utility.
And what's that potential delay look like in terms of time lapse? If we were to do a contingent motion, how much would that set back the project into the county?
I think my most honest answer is I'm not sure, because it would just be contingent on a conversation that we don't know the answer to yet with another entity. The delay in holding up this with the county, they have requested that we give them an answer by the end of April. I told them that I would do my best on that, but I think we could ask them for additional time. But as I think Mr. Nelzine said, they're getting pretty antsy with us to say yes or no. So I know that's kind of a convoluted answer, and I apologize if it's not totally clear, but I think there's a few different moving parts here. So it's the delay of telling the county yes or no, and then what the amount of time it might take to explore that other discussion with Canby Utility is kind of an unknown. But again, I'll take your direction as council, and I will move as quickly as possible on whatever direction you ask. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Jordan, for those questions. I think I see Councilor Bangs and Councilor Parker. I'll get to your guys up here next. I think the conversation is a City of Canby and a Canby Utility conversation, not a Canby Utility County. I think in that regards, I think if we're going to make a motion, I think we need to leverage, recommendation, option 2 and 3 first, and then 2. If this is something forward, and I think, yes, that there needs to be, I don't think we can tie Canby Utilities want or not want to participate any more than what they've done unless we start, that's that conversation. That's got to be city utility conversation, I think. So Councilor Bangs and then Councilor Parker.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. It's not a resolution or an ordinance. So I would just move that we authorize the city to move forward pursuing the burying of the lines using option 2, and that we also direct city staff to continue negotiations with Canby Utility in the hopes to improve their support of the project.
I second.
Okay, so motion to direct, or I guess approve the direction of staff to use the option number 2 street fund reserve balance and to continue to pursue conversation with Canby Utility regarding the utility burying on South Ivy. Is that what I'm hearing? We're not looking at number 3 at all?
That's what I was going to ask. Are we not going to pursue the federal funds if we're just going to number 2 only?
Counselor Banks?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so my motion does not include number 3. I think number 3 is fraught with some problems, potentially legal issues, like you're not supposed to use it for streets. We don't know that answer. So I don't really want to do this without knowing where the money is going to come from. I do want to say, I think that Jordan is basically right. I agree with his position, but I don't believe we can wait any longer. So I think it's a decision time. It's an awkward and uncomfortable one, but I think that that's what we get paid the big bucks for, is making these decisions with a lack of perfect options.
Okay, Counselor Parker, did you? No, okay, Counselor Spoon?
Yeah, I would be comfortable using option number 2. I would rather that our direction be more like we'd use number 2, but would be open to revising funding should number 3 become available to us. I would like to keep that option open until we know what we can and can't do with it. So, I mean, I would be comfortable if option 3 were not available to us legally using option 2, but I just want to keep the door open on option 3 until we have an answer on whether or not we can use it, if that makes sense. I would just like to keep my options open until we have to decide where the money is coming from. Absolutely.
Thank you for articulating that. Thank you. Counselor Tibbles?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add, I get the well-spiritedness of it. I mean, I negotiate deals all day long for a living and stuff in agriculture specifically. And you don't have any leg to stand on if you have zero leverage. And we have absolutely zero leverage by saying, we're going to do the project anyway, but we'd really like you to help us out more. And so that's why it's going to be a no vote for me unless we include it as a contingency. I know it pushes back a couple of weeks, but it's like, why would we sign off on doing something without trying to get the best available deal?
Okay. Thanks.
What would that number be for you, Jordan? Like at what is it like if they covered half, if they covered, like, is there a number for you where you would feel comfortable moving forward, just so that I guess we have some more information to work with on what we're kind of looking for, I guess, from Cobb?
Yeah, I mean, I think that 6 is a minimum, but I would like to see half. I think that if we start at half and we 6, double what it is right now, I think puts us in a better position from a budget perspective. And that's what I would like to see. I think that is a reasonable amount.
Okay. Counselor Banks?
I agree. I think that's a reasonable amount. I'm not happy with Cub. I don't have a very good handle on Cub because I've never attended any of their meetings or anything like that. But my guess is if they increased it to 300,000, they don't really intend to go more, regardless of whatever kind of leverage we can apply. However, I wanted to say that I still just want to look forward with number 2 and not number 3. If in the future we discover that we can use that stimulus money from the federal government for streets, there's no reason why we couldn't move that money into that same street fund that we're taking it out of now. So we could still make that transfer, but at least we're covering our bases by providing the money that we're saying to the city to move forward. That's the reason I would like to at least look at number 2 before if we vote no on 2, then I'm going to want to make a motion for number 3. First, I'd like to see us vote on number 2.
No, and you're right. We have a motion on the table. I just wasn't, I think Councilor Spoon's comment is that, amending the motion to include option 3 as an option, or if, as she stated, if the funds do become allowed to be used in that capacity.
And I'm saying I don't want to amend the motion. If that fund does become available, we can still decide to devote some of it to the street fund. So I don't think that changes anything, and I would like to move forward with an unamended motion.
Is Scott looking for some permanence on where the money comes from, or are you just looking for direction in general?
Scott?
Well, first of all, this has been a really good discussion, and I understand the different viewpoints here. Let me try to summarize the financial part of this. So the point is well taken that you don't really want to make a decision unless you have at least a comfortable feeling about the funding source being certain. So the motion that you have on the table right now basically directs us to go forward and tell the county that we would like to proceed with the undergrounding. We anticipate that source of funding is what you're speaking of right now. But the bill for that, and then continuing the conversation with Canby Utility, of course, the bill for that isn't going to come due for probably at least a couple of years or perhaps more at the end of the project. And that will be, what that really is a budgetary discussion based on, your direction for us to move forward. So if something changes, whereas any source of funding, not just what's called the American Recovery Plan, but hypothetically, if there was another funding source, which there is a discussion at the federal level of a large infrastructure package that perhaps, I know some of you are saying we don't want to talk about what ifs, and I understand that, but what I'm simply saying is you do have the option. If you say this is the funding source we'd like to use, and that's the motion that you have in front of you, but if something changes between now and when the money comes due, we can certainly bring that back to you for reconsideration, if you will. So that would be clear to me, and you would also not close the door on any other funding opportunities that might be more attractive to use than our street fund that we have right now. We do have the funds. We're anticipating that. We projected that out. That's why we wanted to walk through the 5-year CIP to show that we're projecting that funding being available. And budgeting is not an exact science. It is a projection, but we're pretty good at doing that and knowing where the funding is going to come in. So if you're comfortable with that, we certainly are, and we would take that direction. But yes, we could bring back the funding discussion to you at any point until the bill is due, and you could reconsider that if you wanted to. Does that answer that issue? I hope.
I believe so.
What I'm saying is I don't feel like we need from you a motion that includes other funding sources that might hypothetically be available. If you want to just say definitively, this is where we're comfortable right now, and we could always bring that back to you later if we should have some other opportunity. So
so you're saying just tonight we need one, are we going to invest in this project to the tune of $1 million? And if we are, these are our 3 options that we have available to us to do that. And we would prefer that you start with item 2, and then if 3 or something else down the road comes available, we'll have that discussion.
Correct. I think that's what your motion is on the table right now. But it leaves that option open to discuss later. Yeah.
Okay. Council President Hensley and then Councilor Varwig.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If this has already been asked and answered and I missed it, I apologize, but we're talking about a bill that's not due for a couple of years. How do we know that the number won't change given the rise and fall of costs in construction?
Yep, excellent question, Council President. That is a possibility. There's always that possibility of projects. The estimate was done by the engineer that is working on the project with the county, and they estimated that based on the timeline of when the project would be done. So estimators look out and they do project inflationary factors, and they estimate based on when the project is being done, not in today's dollars necessarily. So again, it's not an exact science. Estimating is exactly what the word says, but estimators on projects tend to be conservative, and they tend to err on the high side, so that the worst case scenario is it comes in below that or at that. But that is not a guarantee. So you're absolutely right, Councilor.
Councilor Varwig?
Yeah, thank you. So Scott, we're not going to get to the end of this project and not have money. You're saying there is money in these three options. We will be able to pay for this. So it's not a what if of whether or not we can actually afford it. It's just a where we're going to pay for it from, correct?
That's correct. I'm confident that if you direct us, we can pay for this project.
Okay.
Yes.
So hopefully that calms some of the questions of what ifs or maybes or all of that. So it is fact that if we move forward, we will pay the bill.
Okay. So, Councilor Bangs, will you restate your motion, please?
Yes, I'd like to direct the city to move forward with its negotiations with the county to bury the lines, authorizing informally $1 million from the street fund reserve balance, and also to direct the city staff to continue negotiations with the Canby Utility Board and see if we can get them to increase their contribution. That's not exactly how I phrased it last time, but those were the two pieces.
Can I just step in here? I'm going to save us for a second. This is Lawyer Joe. Let's not put $1 million on there, because anything over 50,000 requires an ordinance.
I would like to withdraw the dollar figure from my motion. Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
So how about, motion being made by Councilor Bangs to move forward with county plans for undergrounding utilities along South Ivy by using funding from street fund reserve balance, and to continue to work with Canby Utility on further involvement in said project.
Further support for said project. I don't want really involvement so much as we're really looking for money here.
Work with Canby Utility for further involvement. Now you said further?
Support.
Further support
money. I want the money. Show me the money.
Okay.
And I realize this does hurt our negotiating position, as Jordan has stated, but still, I think we should move forward with the vote.
Okay. The motion is there. Is there a second? So Councilor Parker has given a second. Any other questions or comments?
No, I just think that maybe this might be a good idea to have a roll call vote.
Roll call vote has been asked for. So the motion by Councilor Bangs and seconded by Councilor Parker to move forward with Clackamas County in regards to undergrounding utilities along South Ivy by using funding option number 2, the street fund reserve balance, and work with Canby Utility to further, sorry, Chris, what was the word you used? Further support this project going forward. Melissa, roll call vote, please.
Councilor Bangs?
Aye.
Council President Hensley?
No.
Councilor Parker?
Aye.
Councilor Spoon?
Aye.
Councilor Tibbles?
Nay.
Councilor Varwig?
Aye.
Okay. Motion moves forward 4-2. Thank you all for the discussion on that. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Scott, for trying to put a bow on this for us. Appreciate it. Great. Moving into mayor's business, I will pare down my list of items here. Want to let the council know that the city wrote and submitted a letter of support to Congressman Schrader's office supporting potential funding in the infrastructure bill for improvements at the locks at Oregon City and West Lynn. So I wanted you all to be aware that we had done that. Reminder to this group and to the community that our budget process is begun, and our first meeting is May 13th at 6 p.m. Our second meeting is May 20th, also at 6 p.m. And if need be, a third meeting will be May 27th at 6 p.m. Those will be done via Zoom, and it will be with both the budget and urban renewal committees. I want to give a thank you to all the volunteers and to Canby Fire for all the great work at Echo Park. I heard there was a tremendous effort put into Echo Park. Almost 50 volunteers were there for that cleanup, and it made a huge difference in that piece. So thank you to all of you that participated in that. My last piece for tonight was discussing, last night was Parks Board meeting. They had a monthly update from Jeff Snyder and Jerry Nelzine. Two things, Maple Street Park projects discussion. So the netting for around the baseball fields, softball fields has been ordered. That will go up hopefully and installed by the end of June to prevent foul balls from potentially reaching the splash pad and those hanging around there. And then they also reviewed the new sign that's going to go in at Maple Street. The sign is going to look very similar in design to the new one that went in at Locust Street, just a different color. So they had conversation on that. And then let's see, the other big piece was there is a potential donor that wants to make a donation to the development of the pickleball courts. So I presented them with some information on how that organization can make a donation to the city for that future project. So that was kind of their meeting in a nutshell. They also had a hearty conversation on the parks maintenance fee, just income and expenses since the inception of that fee. And so just, the details of that and what's been going on. And so Julie and Scott did a great job of diving into some numbers and providing more information. And so the question became, is that enough information for the group to make, decisions and recommendations? And I think that the group determined that it was. So thank you to Scott and Julie for the hard work on that. I did encourage them to, as I do with any of the committees, that, when we begin the budgeting meetings, for them to, if they want to be more involved in that capacity, to please attend our budget meetings coming up and on the dates and times I just mentioned. So that's all that I will report on this evening for right now. The rest can hold off. We'll move into councilor comments and liaison reports, and we'll start with Councilor Tibbles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have much to report this evening. I unfortunately had some events come up during my Canby Utility Board meetings. I was unable to attend. I look forward to catching up with them and kind of getting up to speed on the latest. I do want to make an announcement or comment on an event that is taking place this Saturday that is called the Canby Woodchuck event. That was originally kind of stemmed from the conversation we had on the previous council meeting with Councilor Spoon, mentioning that, as we can all see, we're driving around Canby and we're seeing some townhouses, apartment complexes, or just some houses that have fallen trees. And I think we've just come to the idea it's either a combination of people can't get it out themselves. It's a property management company that's not making a priority. They're physically unable or they're financially can't pay for someone to come do it. So my wife and I were driving around and she's just like, why not us? So as most good ideas do come from my wife, we just decided to put together an event and got a group of volunteers, some guys who are guys and women who are willing to spend their Saturday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we are going to be going out to the properties that have already got some emails about some people in need, chopping up with chainsaws and hauling the tree to Waite Park, where we'll be having some people with axes cutting up in firewood to donate to other people in need who use firewood and maybe aren't able to cut their own firewood or whatever that looks like. Our preference would be for the people who need it, who maybe can't get it for themselves, to who we give it to, but everyone is welcome. So that event's this Saturday, 9 a.m., 2 p.m., or 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And of course, we will go longer if there is a need and we have so much work, but that's tentatively what we're thinking it will be. So my request for Canby citizens would be, if you yourself have some wood, trees falling in your yards that you need help with, then let us know. You can email me or my wife. We have a flyer on the Canby Now Facebook. Also, I believe it was announced in the Canby Current, so you can find that information there. If you have neighbors that you see they have fallen trees and maybe they're not on Facebook and you want to inform them and pass the word around, that would be great as well. And yeah, we're really looking forward to just serving the community and finishing up. I think it was just very much in the spirit of what this community already did during the ice storm, is come together and finish it, go across the finish line. So any questions or anything like that? I guess, Scott, if you want to add to that, the other piece that the city is doing.
Thank you, Councilor Tibbles. Yes, I was going to raise my hand and ask if I could piggyback on. This was going to be under my city administrator's report, but it goes perfectly with what you just said. So in conjunction with, or sort of in relation to what Councilor Tibbles just mentioned, and thank you for that service to the community, Councilor, and those that are helping you volunteer with that event. The city is, and we've put out information, and I think the council has received this as well, that we're asking our residents to continue to clean up private properties, whether that's your residence or, as you said, Councilor, perhaps like an apartment or a townhouse complex or something. And we're asking that people would do their best to have the properties cleared from the storm debris by May 1st. In order to help with that, in addition to what Councilor Tibbles just talked about, the city is going to do one more drop-off day, like we've done a number of previously. So we're going to have one more opportunity, and I think this will be our last of these, and that will be also this Saturday, the 24th. The drop-off site will be at the Canby Police Department, which is 1175 Northwest 3rd Avenue. Again, this Saturday, and that's from 10 to 3. People can bring their yard debris from the storm and drop off at that site. That is limited to Canby residents, and also it is for private individuals, not for businesses or commercial ventures. So again, this Saturday, people can bring their debris. We have one final drop-off day from 10 to 3 at the police station, and we are kindly asking that our residents would focus on getting that debris cleared up so that we've got our city cleaned up by May 1st, if we can do that. So, thanks for that.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. Councilor Varwig.
Yes, sir. Thank you. For the Planning Commission, you guys might remember, maybe 2 years ago now, there was some talk about a development happening at the corner of 13th and Ivy. And the Planning Commission recently heard another development proposal for that space, which they also have declined. And so that is going to be in the appeal period. So just to let you guys know, that might be coming up in front of us for a memory care facility. Secondly, talking to Gordon at CTV, and he is saying if we are going to be moving into a hybrid model, he needs about a month of time to get all of the systems fired back up there at council chambers. So as we start having those conversations, can we please make sure he's included in those in order to make sure that we have those fired up before we get going back on our live meetings. And then from Canby Fire, I've got a big list of stuff here. Chief Davis was sent me an email just with a bunch of different stuff that they've been going through. And as you can imagine, this last year has been a very busy year for them. COVID, wildfires, ice storm, and again, wildfires. Last Friday, the Interagency Fire Cooperative had Canby listed as the highest fire danger in the United States. So lots of warm weather, lots of wind. And they were right. He says there were 2 wildland fires, and they also responded to a big fire outside of Oregon City and helped out with that. So just a reminder, backyard burning is closed. Recreational fires are highly discouraged, and Canby Fire and myself and a bunch of different people would beg you, please don't have recreational fires, even in fire pits, until the weather dies down. The bond projects that the voters approved, the main station is done. It was done within budget, and they are in it back into the main station. So stop by if you want to see that renovation. The new or used ladder truck is now in service. We have a new medic unit ordered, a wildland engine has been ordered, and another tanker has been ordered. So Canby Fire is growing. The North Side Fire Station will start construction in June. So they're getting that area ready to go. Obviously, COVID slowed them down on doing that, but they are getting going in June. And as stuff does, cost for steel has increased 30%. So there was, since they purchased the pre-engineered building, so there were some savings there. So that's a good thing that they bought it when they did. 2 new firefighters for the North Side Medical Station and 1 replacement, 5 new interns, all volunteers going to college. Laura Green is stepping off of the Canby Fire board, and she's going to be replaced for the time being with Connie Austin. And then Steve Thurman is running again and is not contested. So just so you know for that. There's a couple other things. He just says thank you to a lot of city people for all of the support. So, and that would include Jerry Nelzine and Scott Archer. They're just very happy with the support they've been getting from the city. So thank you to you guys. And that completes my report.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Spoon?
I don't have anything this evening, Mr. Mayor. Jordan, thank you so much for putting that together and organizing it. What a great service for our community. I appreciate your work.
Great. Councilor Parker?
I'll just say what my mother used to say whenever I would say, somebody ought to do something about that. And she would say, you're somebody. So nice role model there for you and your wife, Jordan. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Councilor Bangs?
The library board has not met since we have had our last meeting. The Canby School Board has had numerous meetings, mostly related to the superintendent search. The biggest news, and that's all I'm really going to say in my brief report here, is that the schools are returning to 4 days a week. It's almost full-time classes. We're still not having instruction on Mondays. So we're still not back to normal or pre-COVID, that we are planning for that in September. So we have full expectation that we're going to be back to normal in September, hopefully with like 2 directional hallways. Starting Tuesday next week, though, we will have, the majority of our students there Tuesdays through Friday. And it's going to create some hiccups. We have to have a closed campus for lunches at the high school, which we're not used to, and we don't really have the facility for that. And so we're going to see how that works, and hopefully enough kids will choose to eat outside, so we have space for them. But we're having a split lunch schedule. Some kids are going to remain on Zoom because the state requires that we have that as an option for students. Certainly, there are some families that are at high risk and cannot risk being in person, so we have to provide that education for them. So teachers are going to continue to be teaching on both Zoom and in person simultaneously, but our classrooms are going to be roughly twice as crowded as they were. I'll just repeat that we had about 70% of our students sign up for in-person instruction, but the reality has been closer to 50%, with the other 50% still on Zoom, and that's a family choice issue. We remain excited about having our students coming back. I certainly think it's a healthy experience for the kids. It has certainly been challenging navigating the Oregon Department of Education guidelines, which change periodically and which sometimes don't make a ton of sense. For example, our students are allowed to have lunch with each other, but they have to maintain 6-foot spaces. Teachers are not allowed to do that, even though the majority of us have been vaccinated. So, and I'm not griping, I'm just saying that there's been a lot of challenges in trying to navigate ODE's guidelines. So anyway, that's the exciting part is we're gonna have more kids back in person, nearly on a full-time schedule starting Tuesday next week. I also wanna applaud Jordan's Woodchuck endeavor. I think it's a great one. I would point out to you that woodchucks are also called groundhogs. So in case you guys wanted the anatomy or animal, fun animal facts for today.
Thank you, Councilor Bangs. Appreciate it. Council President Hensley.
Fun animal facts with Councilor Bangs. We can have a segment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All I have to report is just the progress is still going on with the Traffic Safety Commission as far as looking at the enterprise car situation over on the southeast side, and also the project, the citizen concern on 10th and Birch. Those are still being looked at, as well as some concerns that were brought up on Redwood and Territorial. So they're going to be doing some little field trips and looking at things. And so just wanted to let y'all know that that's still being looked at and how those balls haven't been dropped. But that's really all I have to report. And it's going to rain Saturday, so I think we're going to get soggy, Jordan, but I'll see you there.
Councilor Spoon.
Yeah, thank you. Council President Hensley, has traffic safety revisited, when we did the development between Fur and Ivy and 13th, kind of behind Hope Village, have they revisited a stop sign at Fur and 13th at all, or?
That hasn't been talked about lately, but I can certainly bring it back to the table at the next meeting.
Yeah, would you mind? I've been walking and biking and driving, and it gets a little bit kookier there. The more every time a new family moves into one of those houses, that's 10 more trips a day or whatever it is. So I'd love if you'd bring that back to them.
Sure will do.
All right. Thank you all for your updates. I appreciate it. Scott, City Administrator, Business and Staff Reports.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll be brief. The items I had for you have already been touched on in council reports, so thank you. I did just want to add quickly on to Councilor Varwig's comment about the looking at going into setting up a hybrid council meeting arrangement. And I did just want to assure the council that we're working on that. Staff, we have a few of our staff are working on pulling together all the equipment and the logistics. And we, in fact, are coordinating that with CTV5. And so thank you for that reminder. But yeah, I just wanted you to know that we are working to do that as soon as is possible. And there are some logistical issues we're trying to work out with the production end of things. And that's
Scott, my apologies if that came across as saying you hadn't. I know that you have, and he just mentioned that to me in passing today. So I just wanted to make sure that we all knew that. Some people have asked about going back to in person. I just wanted to make sure people knew that he needs some time in order to get things to going before we can do that. So
thank you, Councilor. I also didn't mean it to sound like you were suggesting that. I was just adding on to that to let you know that on the staff end of things, we are in fact pursuing that. And so there is activity happening on that, and as soon as we have something definitive, we'll bring that to you. So thank you. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Next opportunity for citizen input. Melissa, anybody for anything?
There is not.
Okay. Then Melissa, action review.
Okay, you have approved the consent agenda, adopted ordinance numbers 1546 and 1548. Passed ordinance numbers 1547, 1549, and 1550 to second readings on May 5th. And you've also approved resolution 1346.
Great. Thank you for that recap. A busy night for us here on the council. And we're not quite done yet. So we do have an additional work session here a little bit after we are done with regular business. So we will maybe, does everyone need to take a 5-minute break or press on?
I'll need to have a short break.
You will?
Quick break.
Okay. So we're going to take, I've got 9:48 here on my clock. We'll come back at 9:55. So it's more like a 7-minute break. So, and then we'll continue with our work session conversation regarding Mr. Archer. All right.
Are we staying on this link?
Yes,
No.
we're staying on this link. So we'll be back momentarily.
Do we need to
right, so Canby, we're back. Thank you. So this evening, what was going to be handled earlier, we're going to handle now, and that is a conversation regarding the city administrator's 6-month review process, and then turning it into a discussion. So back when Scott was hired, we were going to use our retreat to set our council goals and project conversations, and that was going to be much of Mr. Archer's activities going forward, that we were going to use to measure him and touch base with him at the 6-month mark on. And well, the 6-month mark is here, and we've not done our goal setting meeting yet. We've not had that project planning necessarily. So he's picked up the ball and has been running with it since he started in November, right? Was it, Scott? Was it November?
November 9th.
Yeah. In November. So so this conversation is not in exec session because we're not talking about Scott per se. We're talking about the process or what we want to do from a 6-month check-in standpoint. I did email to all of you earlier. So earlier today, being more like, I don't know, 4:30, 4:45, I was the City of Canby City Administrator Performance Planning and Development form as a potential guideline for what we may want to do in terms of tailoring this conversation. Now, there's a lot of different ways we can go about this. This is not a performance evaluation necessarily for Scott. This is more of 6 months, you've done these things and we appreciate it. Now the next 6 months, we want to see these things being continued. Here's the review form that we would use at the year mark when it's time for your evaluation. So please, I know there's been some conversation, Councilor Parker, you had initiated or discussed, do we even like the forms that we've been using? How do we revamp those? And I totally think that that's a worthwhile conversation, but I think we've got to we can't drop that on Scott. Right. So going forward in November, we can do that. So we can go off of this from a conversation piece, but that would mean we've got to do some homework between now and the next meeting in terms of what goals we collectively want to see from Scott. So that form can be a reference tool for you. Another common review or performance evaluation aspect is you can go through his contract that we have. That's another tool that we can use to determine what would be some good goals. Another methodology is something that I've used in the past with my directors as a touch point is something called the start, stop, and continue. So here's what I want you to start doing. Here's what I want you to continue to do. And here's what I need you to stop doing. So that's another approach that we can take. So really this time is just a conversation on, how do we want to proceed? And give me some framework on that piece. Joe, is it city councilor, city attorney Joe, or assistant city manager Joe?
So I just wanted to make sure, and nice, a perfect job of staying sterile about the process. You guys, of course, it's funny, we were chatting about this. The executive session on his actual evaluation actually protects you. You could always do it in public, and he could always demand that it happens in public. But the reason most of the time you guys want that to be an exec session is because in public employment, if you have any sort of evaluation and anything is construed as bad, then the candidate or your employee actually has what is called a right to a louder mill hearing for a name clearing. And so the executive session does a nice job of not making a statement public about your employee so that you get to sidestep that whole notion of him getting to clear his name. The reason I mention this is because we want to be sterile about, if we're just talking in the process, unless you all just decide, we don't mind talking about this in public and taking those risks, I would make sure that you're more sterile about the process here so that you can use a protected process of exec session to actually do the evaluation. So this is I would be remiss if I didn't share this with you and remind you of that.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, again, this is about the process. Like, how do we want to go about setting and what those goals would look like? Then that may just have to be something we will need to do in a non-sequential email kind of status piece. That's for your Joe benefit, or benefit of you, Joe, on that, to make sure we're, not having serial meetings via email. But what's the process we want to do? Send those to me. I can tabulate it, put it together, kick it back out, and then we can schedule Scott's goal setting piece here for the next meeting in beginning of May.
Yes, that works. Thank you again for avoiding the serial meeting. If you just become the repository of all their separate ideas, and then you can come up with what sounds like what they're all asking for, and then now you have a new form that you can send back out and let them fill it out. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Yeah, in terms of goal setting, I guess I have some reservations about, unless I misunderstood, about not doing it in a conversation where we can all talk, because I don't know how we come to a consensus about what goals we have for Scott if we're just all sending a separate email and then you're compiling it, because that might not necessarily represent, the goals that we have as a group. So are we also going to have a conversation about the goals? Or I guess I just want to make sure I understand.
It's a very good question. Let me hang on to that one for a second.
Okay.
Council President Hensley?
Well, I was kind of thinking that you're wanting emails about the process, what our ideas were on the process. You were actually asking emails about goals. I was kind of the same question.
Tonight's conversation is the process. Like, how do we want to go about? I mean, if that's just us coming together and having that conversation with Scott, I suppose that could be a methodology that we can do. Again, Joe, for clarification, is that does that fall under exec session or not?
Yeah, if it's an evaluation of his performance, it definitely does. We were just going to talk just about process because we were trying to even figure out what you were going to talk about. That technically fit under there. So that's
so an option is for us to then just get together at the next meeting and have a group collective conversation about what we want to see for Scott over the next 6 months.
Yes, and that's fine because you can then have the evaluative, conversation about, how you want to see it done, how you've seen his strengths and what he might want to work on for you guys.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Sure.
Does that help, Sarah?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It does. And I kind of see goal setting as part of the evaluation process that would happen in executive session anyway, because like you said, it's part of what we want to see from him moving forward.
Yeah.
I feel so weird talking about you as though you're not there. It's part of what we would like to see from you moving forward. And so I guess I see it as part of the evaluation process. To me, it makes sense if we're going to have a cohesive goal as a board, that we have a conversation about it in an executive session instead of just emails that only one person sees. You know what I mean? It's harder to evaluate that way.
Okay, no, fair. Thank you for that. Councilor Hensley?
I think also in terms of process and format, I like your idea of the start, stop, continue rather than that really rigid form that we had in the past. I don't know that given the circumstances that we haven't laid out specific goals for him yet, that I really don't think that form suits this situation. So at least for this evaluation, maybe the start, stop, continue format would be best.
Okay. Councilor Bangs?
Yeah, I had one concern that if we create a list of goals that are not in line with the actual job description of a city administrator, that we're giving him confusing tools for evaluation. Like we say, well, Scott, we really want you to pick up laundry and bring more clowns into the city, but it has nothing to do with the business of managing a city. And I think that's unfair to the city and to Scott. I'd like to see, we have a job description for city manager already, don't we?
Yes, we do.
That should be the criteria under which we evaluate, I think, the job performance. It's like, what does it say that he's supposed to be doing?
He's supposed to be implementing the goals of the council, but we have not been able to have our goal set ourselves yet. So this is kind of a weird circumstances this time.
Yeah. So because Councilor Hensley and Bangs, you're both correct in that, yes, there's a job description portion that we review him on and what his job entails. But then there's also the component of our goals that we want to see get accomplished within the confines of his job. And so that's this piece that we've not laid out for Scott, because we've been very ethereal and a lot of ideas, and we know big bucket kinds of things that we want to talk about. It's, what are how can we get, SMART goals for Scott, basically.
Well, and I think contextually too, we hired him right. He started right after the election. So if I recall our conversations, it was kind of like, it feels weird for a board to set goals for you that will not actually be the board that evaluates you or that you work for necessarily. So we kind of normally, I guess in the past have kind of set more goals at the beginning of the process, but because of the timing of everything, it just like the timing was just all odd. So we kind of delayed some of that process, and then we didn't have our goal setting session. Do I remember that right, Brian? Like we kind of, it was kind of just get used to your job, get settled in, and then we'll set goals for you because the whole board was potentially changing.
Yeah. Councilor Parker?
It's getting past my bedtime, so I'm not sure how coherent I'll be, but I think our biggest virtue is just to get this done, is to get a 6-month check-in and say we like this, we don't like this, we want you to do more. There's two parts of being a city administrator, I think. One is the daily operations, your relationship with the city employees, with the community at large, with the city council. I think those are fair things for us to evaluate him on, and to take a look at the contract, make sure that we've read it, and just to go through the different points of I remember one of the elements is community outreach, which is kind of difficult in a pandemic. So we do have a resource now in a human resources director who we could encourage to find the state of the art for municipal administrators evaluation. Because I'm with Tracy, that the one that we've used before, it seems a bit clunky, and it kind of confuses those two elements. We want to, in my mind, evaluate the administrator on how he or she administrates, and then how well he or she is carrying out her goals. A little early, I think, to be doing the second one. And I think it's probably fair that we just initially say we like or don't like the number of emails we're getting, need more or less. Here's the buzz from the people in the public. Here's what we want you to do. But again, I think the biggest virtue is just getting this done. It doesn't have to be elegant the first time, I would say.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, so if I work with Melissa to send out the Scott's contract, we've got the piece I just sent out a little bit ago, but then the previous evaluation forms that we've used, that would be a good, at least get you guys ginned up and prepared for next meeting to sit down and have some specific, measurable, reachable goals for Scott. I'm seeing some head shaking yes. I know we're all getting a little rummy right now. Okay. So I will work with Melissa and what those pieces are, and we'll get those kicked out as soon as possible. So you guys have time to noodle and think eloquent thoughts for Scott's goals and whatnot for the next 6 months or so. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on this, just in terms of the process? Okay. See, I told you it could be short and sweet. I appreciate it. Scott, any questions that you have for the group on this matter?
No, I don't think so. I look forward to that discussion, and just let me know if I can provide you with any information from my end in advance. That is.
For sure. I would definitely say on that piece, Scott, I think you having, definitely, I know I'm almost confident you would come with your own sense of goals that you want to see as well get achieved over the next, 6 months for yourself. So I'd definitely bring that to the table for the conversation. Okay. Any other input right now? All right. I will work with Melissa to get those out to you as quick as possible. And we'll be ready to go at the next meeting to have that conversation for Scott. Great. I will consider the work session done. Our evening is complete.
I move to adjourn.
And it's moved by Council President Hensley, seconded by Councilor Spoon to end the work session and call it a night. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Good night, you all. I appreciate it. Scott, Melissa, Joe, thank you.